We have invited Åsa Moberg to have a conversation together with 4 women coming from 4 different countries. I just want to say that each of you have experiences of being defined psychiatric patients, and each of you have shown and show that it is possible to get out from there. So very welcome.
Thank you very much. I started working as a journalist in 1968, and I immediately got in touch with psychiatry because I was a columnist and I had a full-length picture byline, a photo byline, and I would say everybody who was locked up in Sweden, mental patients or prisoners, started writing enormous long letters and very interesting letters about their situations. And so I got kind of thrown into this, and I saw so very clearly today when we saw the movie with Gunnel Bergstrand, the kind of unbroken coercive tradition that we have here, the strapping of people, the routine strapping that she talked about, that everybody should be undressed and strapped. I mean, somewhere in the system, it still sits in the walls. It's very sad. I want to introduce to you 4 users, survivors, ex-patients who coincidentally happen to be women. There is some gender issues involved here, no doubt. It's Laura Delano and Mette Ellingsdalen, Fia Backström and Olga Runciman. We start with a presentation round, and we start with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Delano, and I live in Boston, Massachusetts, USA. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what happened to me that led me into the mental health system and how I got out, and I'm going to talk just a little bit about what I'm doing today since getting out of the system. I was 13 when I was first psychiatrized, and really what got me into the system was my anger. I see now a typical adolescent girl waking up to the world and to these power systems around me that didn't make sense to me, and I didn't know how I fit into it and who I was, and that got me angry. And my parents, they did the best they could, but they did what all parents in America are taught to do when their child is struggling. They sent me to a therapist who soon enough realized I was too serious of a case for her and sent me to my first psychiatrist, who told me within 50 minutes that my anger and rage was a sign of mania and that I had bipolar disorder. And so with that, 13 years of my life and of my developing identity and of my developing sense of belonging to the world was just ripped out from under me. And it took me 14 years to wake up to that and to get out. And I think it's important for me to say that the color of my skin and the class that I was born into have played a crucial role in why I was able to get out. And I think we need to just keep that in the air when we talk about psychiatric oppression and liberation, the role that class, race, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, that all of these things play. So just to quickly describe a bit of how I woke up and how I got out, I see now that there were a few different events that slowly built upon each other that brought me face to face with the power that the system had over me and over my identity and over my body and over my mind. And so these small events involving force and coercion, involving police, all these events unfolded and got me unsettled and got me questioning. And it got me questioning, who am I? I've been on these drugs since I was a child. I don't know who I am. Who would I be? And I was terrified by these questions, but I couldn't sleep at night with them. And I decided I needed to find out. And so through a long story of getting out, I was able to bring myself off of the drugs, 5 drugs I was on at the end. And it was the hardest thing I ever did in my life. I was terrified because the story we're told is you need these drugs to survive, and if you don't have them, you will eventually die, and it's like insulin for diabetes, and so I had this very powerful faith in these drugs, and to let go of that was terrifying to me. But I had to do it. I had to do it, and I did. And since that was a little over 5 years ago, and it's been a long road back. I'm still healing from the drugs. Life is today, I mean, I'm a different person than I was. Each year I look back at these markers of healing since getting out of the system, and it's just profound how much has changed. But I'm still healing for sure. And the work I do today is around spreading awareness and raising consciousness around psychiatric oppression and liberation and what is normal and who decides and the political nature of all of this.
I hope we can get back to what gave you the power and, I mean, to face this struggle of getting out of it. And then Mette is from Norway, and Fia is from Sweden, and Olga is from Denmark. So we have this kind of Scandinavian international representation here.
I came into the psychiatric system at age 22 when I had I will call it today a breakdown, basically, a mental breakdown. I come from a family history of mental abuse and the lack of respect for personal integrity. To come into the psychiatric system would be, you know, that kind of prolong that totally. But what happened was that I had a breakdown. Of course, something was building up to that, but the situation in itself was a shock for me. I basically could not get out of bed one day. So from one day to another, I was not functioning at all and lost the perspective of time and everything. At that time, I had an understanding of what was happening. It was a big shock, so it was, you know, I'd never ever considered the possibility that I could be that helpless, you know, growing up waiting to be a grown-up, to be able to control my own life, and then to come back to a situation where I actually couldn't take care of myself. So it was a shock, but it made sense to me, in the sense that, you know, I knew what had happened before, and kind of the feeling I had was a result of a 22-year-old life. But when I came into psychiatry, of course, I was met with, I think, a quite standard story. I was there in 13 years. I had approximately 25 different types of medications, of all the different types. I had electroshock. I've experienced forced psychiatry. So in that process, I totally lost my whole, you know, my story, the reason why this happened to me. So I kind of, for a while, totally accepted the medical model, the understanding. I think that's something that Laura and I have in common, that to become that patient that actually believe that this is how it is for me, and the feeling even of this being like an illness. That came from the medication, so it was clear to me later, but still it felt like that. I came out because that was maybe 5 years, and then after 5 years I started to my way out of it, and after 10 years I was able to quit medication, and that changed my life totally. And also in the same period that I started to get to quit medication, I also joined an organization, We Shall Overcome, that I later was the leader of for 7 years, and started, you know, to try to understand what had happened to me and understand the system I was a part of, and also to find ways to change it. And today my focus is mainly on human rights as a solution to how to change this. That for me it's absolutely crucial that we get our rights, so that whatever new idea anyone has of what to do with us, we have the right to say no to it. But also just to explore the coerciveness of the whole system, because
we'll get back to that, because it's so important. I very easily identify with any young woman who is locked up in psychiatry and who can't get out of there, because I'm absolutely sure I could have been one of them. I left home when I was 17 to move in with a man that my parents didn't like. He was twice my age, and he didn't fit into their picture of my future man, husband or whatever. And my father was a lawyer, and I'm forever grateful that he didn't follow his first instinct to alarm the whole system and the barnavårdsnämnden, you know, the social security police or whatever. I would never have got out, because I cannot stand authorities, and I'm a very angry person. You won't believe it today, but so and Fia, you are an artist, and you maybe some Swedes recognize you because you've recently been in Ann Heberlein's television series My Two Lives, where bipolar persons take part.
Yes, I was part of that, and I am or am not. I will become a mental work with activism more actively moving onwards. But in 1990, I was given the diagnosis manic depressive, and I was hospitalized with a what they call was a manic psychosis. And like Laura, I guess there had been a lot of rage. I had been very angry and always anti-authoritarian. I guess with this new DSM. I think the disease is called disobedience, defiance, disorder, these new labels always. But anyhow, so I was hospitalized, and I was given lithium. I was given a lot of other medications as well. So throughout the whole 90s, I was in and out of institutions and with a lot of medication, but I was always disbelieving in the system, and I was also reading Foucault, for example, and his histories about the mental institutions and how the patients are always, deprived of a voice or are not heard. So I was always skeptical. By the end of the 90s, I had managed to quit almost all medications. I moved back again to New York, and there I found a great therapist that I've worked with since. But I still was on lithium because I didn't dare to quit lithium until 2010. I got up the courage. There was also a lot of food problems, digestive problems that I experienced. I also started to feel more and more detached or numb to reality, so I understood that I had to somehow to survive to quit medication. By 2010, Occupy happened in New York, and I also started to get engaged with a support network, anarchist support network called Icarus. I also formed a group called Group Guattari, where we work with some of the colleagues of Felix Guattari, reading and writing, and we also traveled to the clinic Laborde. Guattari and his predecessors, Tosquelles and Ori, I would also like to add to David Cohen's list yesterday about this sort of lineages of alternative psychiatry.
Is that in France? Or?
It's in France. It's outside of Paris. So this was also apart from being able to quit lithium, this experience to visit Laborde was also revolutionary for me. In this clinic, of course, desire is one of the main guiding points that they're not even called patients, they're called pensionnaires, express themselves, and it's not a disciplinarian system as I had experienced and as we have experienced to have been institutionalized. I also have never had art therapy in the form that it had been offered to me in the kind of disciplinary form, and at Laborde, and also I, of course, believe in the power of art and poetry too, as a healing factor.
Thank you. And Olga? Olga is a psychologist. We heard about Barbro Sandin's first patient, Elgard Johansson, who became a psychologist. I think that must be a very good merit for psychologists to have heard voices or to have been psychotic.
Yes. Hello, my name's Olga Runciman. Yes, I used to work as a psychiatric nurse in Denmark, and then I've heard voices since I was a child, and much of my trauma started to surface, and I ended up being a patient in the same system in which I was educated, and I like to say I certainly learned the most there. I was in there for 10 years. I was labeled schizophrenic. I ended up on the highest disability that we have in Denmark, as they deemed me completely unable to perform any kind of menial job of any kind. I was defined as a chronic schizophrenic with no possibility of recovery. I existed like that for 10 years before I found my own way out, and I did it in spite of psychiatry and not because of it. One of the things that had been much of the trauma that was coming up, I had nowhere to go with it. And I tried to say I wanted to talk with someone. I wanted to talk with a psychologist and things. And one of the things, I was constantly told that as a schizophrenic, therapy was not suitable. I should preferably go and do some scarf colouring and make jewellery or something instead. So when I came out of psychiatry, I decided that I would become a psychologist for all those people who are told the same message that I am, that you are not suitable for therapy. And therefore today I'm working exclusively with people with so-called schizophrenia, psychosis, bipolar, all the people that are often told they shouldn't do that. So I like to say I'm actually Denmark's first officially mad psychologist. And so I'm sure there are a lot of unofficial ones. And I was thinking a little bit yesterday about David Cohen's talk. Because I try and think what sort of way do I work, if I was going to say that. I certainly believe in Saz, in the myth of mental illness. I absolutely. I'm also an activist. That needs to be said. I work very, very much as an activist, and like Mette, human rights is absolutely top of my list. So Saz is absolutely an inspiration, because I truly do believe these diagnostic system is a total construction of dreadful dimensions.
But because you said something that connected to, because you said, I got out of it on my own. It was not something in the system that helped. No. And you said, when we entered today, when we came in here, you said to me, when I talk to people like audiences or psychiatric staff, I think they say, you must tell us something that works. And you said, nothing that you did ever worked. I would like to put that question to you. But could you develop on that? Because I think that's interesting. It must be depressing for the psychiatric system to hear.
It's never that black and white, even for me. Of course, during 13 years, I did experience things that helped me. I had psychotherapy for years that outside of the more institutionalized system that did help me to work through some things. But when it comes to, what helped me to become a citizen again, a person that could actually be a part of society, I have no better answer than to say that life did that, not treatment. Treatment in itself, I think less treatment and more life, including care, including space to actually be and think and evolve as a human being. But treatment in itself is, for me, today a very small thing. It's a small thing in the sense that I don't think the solution is in treatment. You can have help from that in periods of your life and help to work things through. But I think for me, actually, to stand up against the system was one of the things that really helped me I started my career as an activist out of frustration because I had electroshock, and that harmed me, and I was not believed on that. So I had on my own many years of trying to figure out, get the research, everything, and in the end, at the same time as I joined Visual Overcome, that ended up in the newspapers. And just to start fighting it and understanding how to get out of it, what are this power structure, what has it done to me? I think actually what was said after the last movie with when you don't even have to use force anymore because people abuse themselves. I think that really hit me, because I think that is a very essential thing, and to actually face that and start to try to understand, and in that getting out of the system, that helped me also heal in a way,
But may I ask you, because you have seen a clinic that you really like, the Labor clinic. I suppose that is treatment as well, isn't it?
Yes, but the treatment is not only for the pensionnaires, it's for the whole institution. It's called institutional therapy. So it's again, it questions the definition of who is the sane and who is in need of treatment here. So yes, but the treatment also, as I said, there's a lot of different kinds of activities that are art or art related. And that's a very important part of, or theater related, and that's a very important part of being together and sort of working through what these things are.
I have a personal experience. I lived for a long time with that man that my parents didn't like. He became a psychotherapist, and so he spent 15 years of his life before he died in 1988 as a psychotherapist. And the companion that came into my life after that, he was bipolar. I didn't realize it in the beginning, but I felt very strongly in the first manic psychosis there is such a thing as mental illness, and I cannot handle it, and love is no remedy. And so I feel there is most of it is a myth, but something needs to be taken care of. And how would you? How could anyone do, like when you are standing beside a psychosis, and you don't even know it is a psychosis because you don't. At the time, this was in the beginning of the 90s. I had read everything in theory, and yet I didn't know what it was when it struck my family.
That question ties into your previous question about what helps, for me at least. And I think, well, I'll speak for myself. When I contest the notion of mental illness, I'm not contesting the reality of tremendous struggle and suffering and non-ordinary experiences. And I think it's safe to say that most of my comrades and colleagues feel the same way. And so what was incredibly, to me, the medicalization of human experience, whether it's emotions or thoughts or beliefs or behaviors, that was my biggest prison. Was the biggest prison I was in wasn't even the actual institutions I was a part of. It was my internalized, institutionalized, medicalized consciousness. And because we grow up in a world that teaches us to fear difference and teaches us to just desperately pursue this idea of normal, whatever that even is, I think that fear drives us to want clear-cut, definitive explanations for things we don't understand or things that scare us. And I took that on within myself, and that's why I ended up becoming a mental patient. That was who I was. I was a mental patient because I was so afraid of my darkness. I was so afraid of these beliefs, these thoughts I had that didn't make sense to me, of my urge to die, of the suffering and pain I felt. And for a long time, thinking, oh, it's because I'm sick. That helped me because it gave me an explanation, and what the biggest help for me in getting out of the system was finding a way to contest that ideology within myself, and also finding a way to reckon with that fear, and grapple with that fear. And because I by no means am normal today, I the concept of mental health I think is just as problematic as mental illness, because what does that even mean? I don't think life is meant to be about balance and high functionality and productivity necessarily. That suits our capitalist and kind of neoliberal world for sure, if we all are that way. But I think we need to contest that. And so today I embrace my intense emotions and my sensitivities and my paranoia and all of these things, because they're meaningful. They're reasons why I feel that way, because of my gender, growing up in the culture I grew up in. All of these dark and once troubling experiences I now see as incredibly important, of part of who I am, and I don't want to be balanced. Fuck that.
Thank you for that statement. It's really good. When you get into very sensitive points of your own life, it's like you cannot touch on them without touching your own tears. Mm-hmm. So I totally agree. We need more more of all kind of feelings and emotions, anger and sadness.
For me, the psychosis, or whatever we call it, I think it's an expression of extreme distress, and I think that has to, of course, be acknowledged. One of the things that I absolutely do contest is our labeling, our diagnostic system. We all have a need to put, order in things. So, you can categorize, and we all categorize, but it is what we do with those categories. And we have an incredibly abusive system that actually re-abuses, and I personally believe keeps people in the system for much longer. In fact, many people are lost souls in there, which I think is absolutely dreadful. If I was to think of myself, one of the things when I became labeled as a schizophrenic, and I ended up, I was locked away initially for 7 months. So the first, during those 7 months, I lost absolutely everything that was of value to me. My network, all my friends, my job, my studies, my partner, everything went away. And no matter what I tried to say, it was met with these, it's because you are schizophrenic, it's because you are psychotic right now, you disagree. No, nothing is called disagree, it's called you're psychotic now, and if you don't start to behave yourself, we know what will happen. And so I think this is a huge problem. But also one of the things was I actually ended up believing I was a schizophrenic. Now I was a nurse, a psychiatric nurse, so I was schooled in that way of thinking. But I'd also been schooled in that the drugs, if you give people drugs, yes, they have some side effects. They're not that bad. And they'll usually go away after a little while. So when I was drugged up to my eyeballs, it just didn't recognize this teaching that I had, that this was a little side effect. So I never actually, and it can be quite unbelievable when I think about it as a psychiatric nurse, but I never connected the effects of the drugs with my symptoms were actually drugs, that they had such a profound ability to incapacitate me. Absolutely. And that, I think, is one of the reasons that we have so many people who are trapped. We cannot get out. And I would not be sitting here today if I had not gotten out of that system and off that so-called abusive, well, I call it abusive, but so-called treatment.
So I just also want to say, my experience was with psychiatrists here in Sweden who told me that I have to be on lithium for the rest of my life. Otherwise, I risk, like you say, to die, and I risk of also losing the only, medicine that actually helped me, because if I quit it, I might not be able to go on it. And there were all different kinds of, stories of threat that was being told to me so that I would stay on lithium. And to come back to the question of capitalism, what a wonderful idea to create customers for life in this way. So I also didn't recognize all of my dietary problems and all the other things that I thought were totally separate, but that actually I understand now after the fact that they were belonging to it, and also all these warnings about how sick I would get if I quit. I had the fortune, to quit with somebody who helped me through a very long process. It wasn't a quick phase, from one day to the other. It took 1.5 years, I think, and to get rid of the medication, and then many years after that too, to kind of gather what was basically my body without a skin, and with a lot of new emotions that were both incredibly rich and wonderful to feel, but also very scary. And among them, of course, feelings of mourning and feelings of psychic pain that had been suppressed by the medication, and also by a culture that is obsessed with happiness.
I think to acknowledge the pain, that's absolutely necessary, and also the need of help or some kind of support. But I think that what I really would have wanted, if I should look back at it today, was to have the acceptance that is room for you in this world, for me in this world. It's room as a human being in the state you are now without fixing you. Because this need to fix people all the time, and that's why I'm kind of rejecting a bit when it comes to treatment, because this need to fix someone without, then it's also need to be defined what needs to be fixed, why, how quickly should it happen. And what I didn't get, and what I really think would have helped me to get, was to get the acceptance that with these feelings, you are still a full human being, and it's room for you.
I've got two things I want to say. One is I was very inspired by Gunnel. I don't know if I say your name right.
Yes.
Gunnel, yes, because I believe that the way you rise out of the ashes of shame is something that is absolutely, you're throwing away the shackles of shame. And I think it is our stories that are the most powerful. And when you do that, you also remove shame from others, and you help them. And I think that's very, very important. And one of the things I talked with Karina, or we wrote, I wrote a blog because I was so horrified to discover that the Danish Psychiatric Foundation wishes to implement the ability to prescribe forced treatment. I made this promise, it was sort of a manifesto for those who wanted to write it down, and I was thinking we can write it in a better way for people who work in the system or who wish to help. I promise anyway, that I will never participate in diagnosing a fellow human being. I will never view anyone through the lens of psychopathology, and instead I will respect people's dreadful life stories and the impact that this has on their lives. I will not support the medical model of mental distress, and I will never, ever condone forced treatment, and I will support the CRPD because I do believe that can give us, finally, in the end, rights. And I was thinking, perhaps, that we could have that. Yes, good.
Yes, I want to sign that too. And I also would like to bring then the question from the small scale, from our individual lives, also to the bigger scale of the social and the world, and the kind of disasters of the world that are going on, ecological, military, and so forth. Of course, also the pharmaceutical industries are part of this. So I would like to then, expand on the word ecology, that how we're working together, also not only in this room, but in our own communities, and that's... to think and live ecologically is, of course, a political action. It's action for what we're talking about here, and it's a thought that I would love if it could also grow in to change these psychiatric institutions.
I had a 12-year relationship with my bipolar ex-companion. We wrote a book about our experiences, and it was published in 1999, and I have published 21 books, and to this day none has been so successful in, even economically, which everyone said from the beginning, no one will be interested in reading about this. But we would probably still have been a couple if we could have gotten the kind of help that we needed as a family. But you could never get the kind of help that you needed. You have a fairly expensive psychiatric help system, but it destroys families, and we haven't been able to talk about that today. But the whole idea, as it works in Sweden, of personal integrity and secretess and silence, the law-induced silence around the patient, it creates a circle of loneliness, the one that you, and it's a terrible loneliness machine, so to speak, really very, very counterproductive. So if you could start from scratch and ask the person and the person's social network what is needed, because at times you need help. What do you need? And then if you could get something you need instead of medication and being locked up and being strapped.
In my work, I have tried to focus on two things. One of them is human rights, and that's what I basically do today. But the other is the need of alternatives. Because, of course, one thing is when you're yourself, and myself has, now I can deal with my own life, but I'm faced all the time with people who can't, where the desperation for some support, for help, that does not coerce you, that does not intrude on your personal wishes. So I don't want to undermine the need for support and help. I just don't want to call it treatment all the time, but it's still, there is a tremendous need for that. And I think that these changes has to happen together. That you have to build up that, and you have to build down the traditional psychiatry. But I think that if we don't do it together, if we don't get our human rights, then we will never succeed anyway, because there is new ideas all the time. I think this clip film that was showed yesterday, with the question in the end, are we still the good guys? I think that's a good question, because I think any kind of intervention, any kind of treatment can become coercive, can become intrusive, and can harm people if you don't have a fundamental respect of people as equal human beings with full and equal rights. That's why I focus mainly on that, because I think that is where the protection lies against harm, that you can actually say no.
Yes.
You are part of this organization. You inspired this day, didn't you, when Karina and Hannah visited your movie festival in the States last year? I mean, so you are really a very essential person today.
I don't know what to say about that, but I think the festival last year was it was a wonderful meeting point for all of us, in a place where a lot of ideas and new connections came, for sure, but a lot of people were a part of that. But I guess the last idea I'll leave here is, first I'm just reflecting on how amazing it is that we all share the same mission, but that we each have these different facets within that our hearts are most drawn to, and how beautiful that is, that we all get to do different things. There's space for all of us to have different work that we want to focus on, all in this greater mission of building a world free from, in my mind, the mental health industrial complex. That's the future I envision. And the thing that excites me the most is that I think, because in my own life, it was internal transformation that gave me all I needed to get out. And again, I want to acknowledge that because I had access to financial support from my family when I couldn't work, because of the color of my skin, I want to acknowledge that it is much more complicated. Not everyone can just decide they're going to come off the drugs and then go and do it. It takes tremendous resources and safety and security to be able to do that. I want to acknowledge that. But it was all internal. It was an awakening within me. It was a connection with a new kind of critical consciousness. And I think all of these institutions, the institutions of psychology and psychiatry and all of it, they exist because we think we need them, because we're afraid of ourselves, and we think we need to be fixed. And I think one of the greatest tragedies to me over the past, 50 to 60 years has been the professionalization of help and the dehumanization of help, that we've forgotten the power that we all have within us and between us in grassroots communities to support one another. And I totally agree that we need help out there. There needs to be help, but that we think we need to go pay a professional to help us, to me, is a great tragedy. And I'm not saying we should get rid of it necessarily, but I think we need to raise consciousness around the fact that we have tremendous power within us as citizens, and we've lost touch, I think, with our neighborhoods and with our local networks. And if we can look within ourselves first and reckon with that fear we have of our own darkness and so-called madness, and then reconnect with one another, I just think the opportunities are endless to slowly lessen the demand of the mental health industry. And that's exciting to me, because it's all within us. Everyone in this room has the power within, we all do. And we need to keep fighting the institutions, of course, these broader structures around us. But it's within us that the change really, I think, needs to happen. And that's so exciting to me. So I have great hope about our future, even though we're in dark times.
I think at least for me, and I think that's quite general, you don't know when is your last hospitalization, and you don't know when it's really turning, before or after. I had no idea that my life would be so much better after quitting medication. I was very lucky that I haven't been hospitalized after, but I didn't know that. And it's not like I knew that, oh no, I'm over this. That was retrospective, that I could see quite a long time after that, oh, wait a minute, there is some distance now. So I just would like to say that when you're in this process of liberating yourself and changing and also to actually get better, it's hard to know exactly where you are in that process while you're there. It might be that there is a long way ahead of you. It might be that it's also very, very short.
I also want to say that breakdowns are, of course, a natural part of life. Mm.
I'm sure I would have gotten back in along my withdrawal journey if I wasn't insulated by class privilege. And so I think reminding ourselves that this is not about like your failing or your weakness or this is about our society failing you, and that, and not you specifically, but anyone who finds themselves in a situation where they go back on or they get locked up again. I think the shame can be so powerful because there is, within our world, there can be this hierarchy of, oh, I'm out and I'm free and you're not and you're in. And I think all it does is allow these oppressive structures and systems around us to continue thriving. And we need to shift that our society has failed, that there weren't other spaces for you to go to. So I just think the liberation is inside of you, and then it's the society around you that's forcing you back in, but you have your consciousness, and that's such a beautiful thing, and that hopefully as time goes on, we can build more alternatives so that people don't have to go back in, and that it's not you, it's the world we live in that's pushing you. I just think it's so important for us to remind ourselves of that and not make it about us as individuals being weak or not strong enough or whatever.
You're not alone. I think that's perhaps one of the things, is to find out you're not alone and to seek out people who will be there. And because nobody does this on their own, but we have a very individualistic, indeed neoliberalistic society today, which promotes individualism.
I still have periods where I don't function very well. I just have learned to deal with that in a way that doesn't get me locked up. I run away instead, but I still have that. I say that I have a psychosocial disability because I don't think it's really something wrong with me. I think I don't live in a society where there is room for my way of functioning very well. I believe in this changing the words, as long as you do it together with changing the content and the understanding. And I do think that if we are able to work together, if I should have one vision, it would be that this goes all together, that the fight for human rights, the fight against the medical model, that it goes all together, that we don't fight each other, that we're able to actually together get that momentum to really change things.
That, I think, was a beautiful last line from this panel. Thank you very much, Mette, and thank you, Olga, thank you, Fia, and thank you, Laura.